The telegram had promised a new life, but Cecilia Parker stood alone on the dusty platform of Independence, California, watching the last passenger disembark from the afternoon train while her heart sank like a stone dropped in a well. 27 years old, practical to her bones, and foolish enough to believe that a man who wrote such beautiful letters would actually show up to marry her. She clutched the worn carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world and tried not to cry in front of the station master, who kept glancing at her with poorly concealed pity. "Miss, you waiting for someone?" the elderly man finally asked, his weathered face creased with concern as the locomotive began pulling away in a cloud of steam and coal smoke. "I was," Cecilia said quietly, smoothing down the green traveling dress she had carefully pressed that morning in the hotel in Sacramento, the dress she had saved for months to buy because she wanted to look her best when Thomas Whitmore first laid eyes on her. "But it appears I was mistaken." The station master shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Well now, Independence ain't a bad place to be stranded, if you do not mind me saying. Mrs. Halloway runs a respectable boarding house just down the main road. Clean rooms, decent food." Cecilia nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill over, and picked up her bag. She had exactly $12.37 to her name, having spent most of her savings on the train ticket from Illinois. The boarding house would eat through that faster than a brush fire through dry grass. And then what? She had no family back home, no one who would send money for a return ticket. Her aunt had died 6 months ago, leaving Cecilia without employment or prospects, which was precisely why she had answered Thomas Whitmore's advertisement in the first place. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she walked along the wooden sidewalk, her heels clicking against the weathered boards. Independence was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of buildings clustered in the Owens Valley, with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising majestically to the west. The year was 1882. And California was still raw and rough around the edges, despite the railroad that now connected it to the rest of the country. She passed a general store, a saloon from which raucous laughter spilled into the street, a blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil competed with the normal sounds of horses and wagon wheels. Mrs. Halloway's boarding house was a 2-story structure that had seen better days, but appeared clean and well-maintained. Cecilia climbed the steps and knocked, and within moments found herself face to face with a stout woman in her 50s whose sharp eyes took in everything about her unexpected visitor in a single sweeping glance. "I need a room," Cecilia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just until I can sort out my situation." Come in," Mrs. Halloway said, stepping aside. "You look like you have had a day of it. I am Martha Halloway, and I run a respectable establishment here. $2 a week includes breakfast and supper, extra for laundry." Cecilia did the mathematics in her head and felt her stomach clench. 6 weeks if she was careful, maybe less. "That would be fine, thank you." As Martha showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor, the older woman's curiosity finally got the better of her. "You come in on the train today. I do not recall seeing you before." "I was supposed to meet someone," Cecilia admitted, setting her bag on the narrow bed. "A gentleman I had been corresponding with. He asked me to come to Independence to be his wife, but he never appeared at the station." Martha's expression shifted from curiosity to sympathy mixed with something darker, something knowing. "Let me guess. Fellow named Thomas Whitmore." Cecilia's head snapped up. "You know him?" "Know of him," Martha said grimly, crossing her arms. "You are not the first young woman who has come here expecting to marry that man. There was another one about 8 months back, poor thing. Turns out Thomas Whitmore does not exist, or if he does, he is not anywhere near Independence." Some man has been running a game, getting women to send him money for various expenses. The last girl had sent him nearly $50 before she realized she had been swindled. The room seemed to tilt around Cecilia. I did not send him money. He never asked for any. Then why would someone go to the trouble of bringing you all the way out here? Martha wondered aloud, her brow furrowed. Cecilia sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unwilling to support her. I do not know. I truly do not know. That evening, she sat in the boarding house dining room picking at a plate of beef stew, while the other residents ate and chatted around her. There were two miners who worked claims up in the hills, an elderly couple passing through on their way to visit family in Bishop, and a traveling salesman who talked too much and laughed too loud at his own jokes. Cecilia felt hollow inside, scraped clean of hope and left with nothing but the bitter dregs of humiliation. After dinner, she walked outside into the cooling evening air, needing to escape the close confines of the house and her own spiraling thoughts. The main street was quieter now, though lamplight still spilled from the saloon and she could hear a piano playing somewhere in the distance. She walked slowly, aimlessly, until she found herself near the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land, and the mountains stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was nearly upon her, and she jumped back with a startled cry as the rider pulled up short. "Whoa there," a male voice said, low and calm. "Did not mean to startle you, miss. You all right?" Cecilia pressed a hand to her racing heart and looked up at the man on horseback. Even in the fading light, she could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the practical clothes of a working cowboy, a hat pulled low over his face. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "I am fine," she managed, though her voice shook slightly. "I should not have been standing in the road." The man swung down from his horse with fluid ease, and as he came closer, she got a better look at him. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was all strong lines and angles, the face of a man who worked hard and lived honestly, and his eyes, even in the dim light, held a warmth that made something in her chest tighten unexpectedly. "You are not from around here," he observed, not unkindly. "Just passing through." "I suppose I am, though I did not plan to be." The words came out before she could stop them, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I apologize. That made no sense at all." A slow smile curved his lips, transforming his serious face into something almost beautiful. "Made perfect sense to me. Life has a way of taking us places we never planned on going. I am Bennett Zimmer, by the way. I run cattle on a ranch about 6 miles north of here." "Cecilia Parker," she replied, then found herself adding, "and I came here to get married, but the groom never showed up at all." The smile faded from Bennett's face, replaced by concern and something that looked like anger on her behalf. "Thomas Whitmore," her eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because you are not the first," Bennett said quietly. "There have been rumors about someone running a cruel game on women back east, bringing them out here with promises of marriage. I am truly sorry, Miss Parker. That is a hell of a thing to do to someone." The kindness in his voice, the genuine sympathy, broke something open inside her, and suddenly the tears she had been holding back all day spilled over. She turned away quickly, mortified, but Bennett did not leave. Instead, he stood there quietly, respectfully, giving her space to cry without making her feel worse about it. "I am sorry," she finally managed, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "This is so improper. I do not even know you." "Sometimes strangers are easier to cry in front of than friends," Bennett said. "No history, no expectations. And for what it is worth, whatever man did this to you is a damn fool." His loss. She looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes and saw nothing but honest sincerity in his face. You do not even know me. I know you are brave enough to travel halfway across the country to build a new life with someone you had never met, Bennett said. I know you did not fall apart when that someone proved to be a coward and a liar. And I know you have the kind of spirit that brings you out here at sunset to look at the mountains instead of hiding in your room feeling sorry for yourself. That tells me plenty. Something warm unfurled in Cecilia's chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Thank you, she whispered. You have a place to stay, Bennett asked practically. Mrs. Halloway's boarding house. But I only have enough money for a few weeks, and then I do not know what I will do. Bennett was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her face in the gathering darkness. Then he said slowly, as if testing each word, I could use some help at my ranch. My housekeeper quit 2 months back to go live with her daughter in Nevada, and I have been living like a bachelor pig ever since. If you wanted work, I could offer it. Room, board, and $30 a month. It is honest work, nothing improper. I've got 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and you would have your own room in the main house with a lock on the door. Cecilia stared at him, trying to process this unexpected offer. You would hire me, just like that. You do not know anything about me. I know you need help and I need help, Bennett said simply. Seems like it might work out for both of us. And besides, he added with that slow smile that made her heart do strange things, his loss is my gain. The way he said it, with such quiet confidence, made her believe for the first time since stepping off that train that maybe things might actually be all right. I can cook and clean and mend, Cecilia said quickly, afraid he might change his mind. I kept house for my aunt for 8 years before she passed. I'm not afraid of hard work. Then we have got a deal, Bennett said, extending his hand. You take tonight to think it over, get settled in at Martha's. I will come by tomorrow morning around 8 and bring you out to the ranch so you can see what you would be getting yourself into. If you still want the job after that, it is yours. His hand was warm and calloused when she shook it, the hand of a man who worked with his body and was not ashamed of it. Thank you, Mr. Zimmer, truly. Bennett, he corrected gently. If we are going to be living under the same roof, might as well use first names, and you are welcome, Cecilia. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. He tipped his hat to her then, mounted his horse with that same easy grace, and rode off into the night, leaving Cecilia standing on the edge of town with her heart racing, and her mind spinning with possibilities she had not dared to imagine an hour before. True to his word, Bennett appeared at the boarding house the following morning driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 well-matched bay horses. Cecilia had barely slept, her mind too full of questions and cautious hope, but she had washed and dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a practical blue calico that would serve well for the work she hoped to be doing. Martha Halloway had clucked approvingly when Cecilia told her about the job offer over breakfast. Bennett Zimmer is one of the good ones, the older woman had said firmly. Lost his parents to fever when he was barely 20 and has been running that ranch on his own ever since. Works harder than any 3 men I know, and he is honest as the day is long. You could do a lot worse than working for him. Now, as Bennett helped her up onto the wagon seat, Cecilia found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the way his hands had steadied her with easy strength. He had shaved since the night before, and in the clear morning light she could see that his eyes were a striking hazel green, flecked with gold. The ride north took them through terrain that grew progressively more beautiful, the Owens Valley spreading out around them with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising dramatically to the west. Bennett kept up an easy commentary, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. "It gets cold here in winter," he explained as the wagon wheels rumbled over the packed dirt road. "Snow in the mountains, frost down here in the valley, but the summers are good for grazing, and there is enough water from the creeks coming down from the high country to keep the cattle healthy. I run about 300 head right now, mostly Herefords. Got 2 hands who have been with me for a couple of years, good men, Jesse and Sam. They keep to themselves mostly, but they will treat you respectfully or answer to me." "What happened to your previous housekeeper?" Cecilia asked. "Mrs. Chen." Bennett smiled at the memory. "She was with us for 5 years, came originally from San Francisco when her husband died. Best cook in the valley and ruled that house with an iron hand. But her daughter had a baby and needed help, so she went to Nevada to be with her family. Cannot fault her for that." They turned off the main road onto a track that led through a stand of cottonwood trees, and then the ranch came into view. The main house was a long, low structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch running along the front and windows that gleamed in the morning sun. There was a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals and various outbuildings, all of it neat and well maintained. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow even in late spring. "It is beautiful," Cecilia breathed, and she meant it. After the cramped streets of the Illinois town where she had lived her whole life, this open land felt like freedom itself. Bennett looked pleased. "It is home," he said simply. "Come on, I will show you around." He gave her a thorough tour, starting with the main house. It was larger than she had expected, with a comfortable sitting room, a good-sized kitchen with a modern stove, a dining area, and 3 bedrooms. One was clearly Bennett's, masculine and spare but clean. The second was smaller and had obviously been Mrs. Chen's, with a narrow bed, a wardrobe, and a washstand. The third was set up as an office of sorts, with a desk covered in account books and papers. "This would be your room," Bennett said, gesturing to the former housekeeper's space. "There is a lock on the door, as I said. I will respect your privacy absolutely. The kitchen is well stocked, and I will give you money for supplies. You just keep a list of what you need, and we will go into town once a week for provisions." Cecilia looked around the small room and felt something settle in her chest. It was simple but clean, and it was more than she had expected to have. "It is perfect," she said softly. They walked out to the barn next, where she met the ranch hands. Jesse was in his mid-40s, a weathered man with gray streaking his beard, while Sam was younger, perhaps 25, with an easy grin and kind eyes. Both men tipped their hats respectfully and welcomed her without any of the leering or inappropriate comments she had half feared. "Miss Parker will be keeping house for us," Bennett explained. "I expect you both to treat her with respect." "Yes, boss," they chorused, and Jesse added, "Be mighty nice to have decent cooking again. Bennett here burns water." Bennett laughed, unoffended. "It is true. I am a terrible cook. You have been warned, Cecilia." The easy camaraderie between them, the way Bennett treated his hired men as equals rather than servants, spoke volumes about his character. Cecilia felt the last of her reservations melting away. "I would like to take the job," she said when they were back at the house. "If the offer still stands." "It stands," Bennett said, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. "Welcome to the ranch, Cecilia Parker." She settled into her new life with surprising ease. The work was hard but satisfying, keeping the house clean and cooking 3 meals a day for Bennett and the ranch hands who came up to the main house for dinner each evening. She baked bread and pies, mended clothes, did laundry in the big copper tub out back, and gradually began to feel like she was building something real and solid instead of just drifting through life waiting for it to begin. Bennett was an ideal employer, respectful and considerate without being distant. He helped her carry water, chopped extra firewood without being asked, and always thanked her for meals even when they were simple fare. In the evenings after supper, he often sat at the kitchen table working on his account books while she mended or prepared things for the next day, and they fell into easy conversations about everything and nothing. She learned that he had inherited the ranch from his parents, that he had built it up from a small operation to something substantial through years of hard work and careful management. She learned that he loved this land with a fierce passion, that he could read weather in the clouds and knew the name of every wildflower that grew in the valley. She learned that he was lonely, though he never said so directly, that the isolation of ranch life weighed on him sometimes despite his love for the work. And she learned, though it frightened her to admit it even to herself, that she was falling in love with him. It happened in small moments, accumulating like snowflakes until suddenly there was an avalanche. The way he smiled at her over his coffee in the morning, the sound of his voice singing softly to himself as he worked in the barn. The time she had twisted her ankle stepping off the porch, and he had carried her inside as if she weighed nothing, his face creased with concern. The evening he had brought her a handful of wildflowers he had picked on his way back from checking the herd, presenting them awkwardly with a sheepish grin. 3 weeks after she had arrived at the ranch, Cecilia stood at the kitchen window washing dishes after supper and watching Bennett work with one of the young horses in the corral. He moved with such patience, such quiet confidence, speaking softly to the skittish animal and never forcing anything. She realized with a sudden clarity that left her breathless that she wanted this to be her life, not just temporarily, but forever. She wanted to wake up in this house every morning. She wanted to cook meals for this man and mend his shirts and listen to him talk about his day. She wanted to build something here, something lasting. But she was just his housekeeper, hired help, and he had never given any indication that he saw her as anything more. The town dance came on a Saturday night in early June, and Bennett asked her if she wanted to go. "It is nothing fancy," he explained, looking oddly nervous. "Just folks gathering at the schoolhouse to dance and socialize. But it would give you a chance to meet people, make some friends in town, and I thought if you wanted to go I could escort you." Cecilia's heart leaped. "I would like that very much." She wore her green dress, the one she had worn to meet Thomas Whitmore at the station all those weeks ago, but this time when she looked at herself in the small mirror, she felt beautiful instead of foolish. Her cheeks were flushed with anticipation, her eyes bright. Bennett's expression when she emerged from her room made her breath catch. He stared at her for a long moment, something unguarded and hungry flickering across his face before he controlled it. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you," she managed, her voice unsteady. The schoolhouse was crowded and warm, full of laughter and music from a fiddle band set up in the corner. Bennett introduced her to what seemed like half of Independence, and everyone was friendly and welcoming. Martha Halloway was there with a contingent from the boarding house. The shopkeeper and his wife made a point of saying hello. Even the local doctor, an elderly man with a twinkle in his eye, welcomed her to the community. But it was Bennett who held Cecilia's attention. He danced with her 3 times, his hand warm and sure at her waist, and each time she felt the connection between them growing stronger, more undeniable. Other men asked her to dance, and she accepted politely, but she kept finding her eyes drawn back to Bennett across the room, and every time she looked, he was watching her. It was late when they finally drove back to the ranch, the wagon rumbling through the darkness under a canopy of stars so thick and bright it took Cecilia's breath away. She had never seen stars like this in Illinois, where town lights washed out the sky. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Bennett asked softly. "Very much. Thank you for taking me." They rode in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence, full of things neither of them quite dared to say. Finally, as they turned onto the ranch road, Bennett said, "Cecilia, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "I know you came here to marry someone else. I know you are working for me because you needed the employment, not because this was your choice. But these past few weeks, having you here, they have been the best weeks I can remember in a long time. You have made that house into a home again. You have made me remember what it feels like to look forward to coming inside at the end of the day instead of dreading the emptiness." "Bennett," she whispered, but he pressed on. "I am doing this all wrong. I never was good with words. What I am trying to say is I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I think about you all the time. I find excuses to come inside during the day just to see you. I lie awake at night knowing you are just down the hall and wishing things were different between us." Cecilia's heart felt like it might burst. "How do you wish they were different?" "I wish you were not my employee," Bennett said bluntly. "I wish I had the right to court you properly, to tell you all the things I am feeling without worrying that I am taking advantage of the situation. You depend on me for your livelihood, and I would never want you to feel pressured to return feelings you do not have just because I am fool enough to have fallen in love with you." The world seemed to stop spinning. "You love me?" "Yes." His voice was rough with emotion. "I love you, Cecilia Parker. I think I started falling in love with you that first night on the edge of town, when you were so brave and so heartbroken and so determined not to let it break you. And I have fallen deeper every day since. But I will understand if you do not feel the same way. You have had enough disappointment in your life. I do not want to be another man who makes you regret coming to California." Cecilia reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You could never be a disappointment to me," she said softly. "Bennett, I came to Independence expecting to marry a man I had never met, someone who existed only in letters. Instead I found you, someone real and solid and good. Someone who treats me with respect and kindness. Someone who makes me laugh and makes me feel safe and makes me want to build a life here instead of just existing day to day. I have fallen in love with you too, completely, terrifyingly in love with you." The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she felt him trembling. "Say it again," he murmured against her hair. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you, Bennett Zimmer." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with infinite tenderness. "I am going to kiss you now," he said, giving her time to object, to pull away. She leaned into him instead, and when his lips met hers it was like coming home, like finding something she had not even known she was searching for. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, but it deepened quickly as weeks of suppressed longing poured out between them. His hands slid into her hair, scattering pins, and she gripped his shoulders, dizzy with the intensity of what she was feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said urgently. "I know it is too soon. I know I should court you properly for months before asking, but I do not want to wait. I have waited my whole life to find someone like you. Marry me, Cecilia. Make this ranch our home together. Build a life with me." Joy flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit judge who came through Independence on his monthly rounds. Martha Halloway stood up as a witness, beaming with satisfaction, and Jesse and Sam cleaned up remarkably well for the occasion. Cecilia wore a new dress of pale yellow muslin that she and Martha had sewn together, with wildflowers in her hair that Bennett had picked that morning. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when Bennett slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were shaking. "I love you," he whispered, just for her to hear, and she whispered it back as the judge pronounced them husband and wife. That night, in the bedroom that had been Bennett's alone and was now theirs together, they came together with a tenderness and passion that left Cecilia breathless and transformed. He was gentle with her, patient, making sure she felt nothing but pleasure and loved beyond measure. Afterwards, lying wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she thought about how strange life was, how the worst day of her life had led her directly to the best thing that had ever happened to her. "What are you thinking?" Bennett murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I am grateful," she said softly. "Grateful that Thomas Whitmore never showed up at that train station. Grateful that I wandered to the edge of town that evening. Grateful that you were riding past at exactly the right moment." She felt him smile against her hair. "His loss is my gain," he said, echoing the words he had spoken that first night. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "I could never regret you," Cecilia said, tilting her head up to kiss him. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Bennett Zimmer." Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Cecilia threw herself into making the house a true home, sewing curtains for the windows and planting a kitchen garden behind the house. She befriended other ranch wives in the area, joining a quilting circle that met once a month in town. Bennett expanded the herd gradually, buying quality breeding stock and building his reputation as a reliable supplier of good beef cattle. They worked hard, but they also made time for each other, for long rides through the valley on Sunday afternoons, for evenings spent talking on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains, for mornings when they lingered in bed longer than they should, wrapped up in each other and unwilling to face the day just yet. In the fall, Cecilia realized she was pregnant. She told Bennett over dinner one evening, watching his face carefully, hoping he would be as happy as she was. He stared at her for a long moment, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth, and then he was out of his chair and pulling her up into his arms, spinning her around and laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" She asked, though the answer was obvious in his face. "Happy? Cecilia, I am beyond happy. You have given me everything I ever wanted, a home, a partnership, love, and now a family. I could not ask for anything more." Their son was born the following May on a warm spring morning, with Martha Halloway attending as midwife and Bennett pacing the porch outside like a caged animal, until Martha finally called him in. The moment they placed the squalling, red-faced infant in his arms, Bennett's eyes filled with tears. "He is perfect," he whispered, touching the baby's impossibly tiny fingers with something like awe. "Cecilia, he is absolutely perfect." They named him William, after Bennett's father, and he was followed 2 years later by a daughter they called Rose, and then 3 years after that by another son, John. The house that had once echoed with emptiness filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, of Bennett singing silly songs at breakfast to make them giggle, of Cecilia reading bedtime stories in the lamplight. Jesse and Sam remained with them for years, becoming more like family than hired hands, teaching the children to ride and rope, always ready with a story or a piece of hard candy from their pockets. The ranch prospered, growing from 300 head to nearly 1,000, and Bennett bought more land, expanding their range into the foothills. There were hard times too, of course. A bitter winter in 1885 when they lost a significant portion of the herd to cold and starvation, and Bennett worked himself nearly to death trying to save as many animals as he could. A summer drought 2 years later that dried up the creek and forced them to drive the cattle to higher pastures. The inevitable accidents and injuries that came with ranch life, broken bones and close calls that left Cecilia's heart in her throat. But they weathered every storm together, their love growing deeper and more resilient with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Bennett took Cecilia back to the spot on the edge of town where they had first met, now holding their youngest son on his hip while William and Rose ran ahead chasing grasshoppers. "I have been thinking about that night a lot lately," Bennett said quietly as they stood watching the sun set over the mountains. "About what a gift it was, you standing there heartbroken and lost, about how close I came to riding right past without stopping." "But you did not ride past," Cecilia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You stopped, you saw me. You offered me a chance when I thought I had none left." "No," Bennett corrected gently. "We saw each other. And we took a chance on something neither of us was looking for but both of us desperately needed." "His loss was your gain," Cecilia said with a smile, and Bennett laughed. "Our gain," he corrected. "This life we have built together, these children, this ranch, all of it. It is ours, Cecilia. And I would not change a single thing." As the years passed, the children grew tall and strong, William taking to ranching like he had been born to it, Rose showing a fierce independence that reminded everyone of her mother, John quieter, but with a gift for working with horses that had Bennett shaking his head in amazement. The ranch became one of the most successful operations in the Owens Valley, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. When William was 19, he fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited young woman named Sarah, and Bennett and Cecilia hosted a wedding that brought together half the valley. Watching their son dance with his bride, Cecilia felt Bennett's arm come around her waist. "Remember our wedding," he murmured in her ear. "Every detail," she said softly. "You were so nervous you dropped the ring twice." "I was terrified you would come to your senses and run," Bennett admitted with a laugh. "Best day of my life, and I spent half of it convinced it was all a dream." "It was real," Cecilia said, turning in his arms to face him. "Every moment of it, from that first night to right now, has been real, and I have loved every minute of being your wife." He kissed her then, sweet and lingering, and she heard their daughter make an exaggerated sound of disgust while their guests laughed indulgently. Some things never changed, she thought with amusement. Bennett would always be prone to public displays of affection, and she would always melt into them despite whatever embarrassment they might cause. Rose married 3 years later, a schoolteacher from Bishop who was patient enough to handle her strong will, and John eventually took over a section of the ranch, building his own house and starting his own herd with Bennett's blessing and guidance. The main ranch house, once so full of noise and chaos, grew quieter again as the children built their own lives, but it never felt empty the way it had before Cecilia arrived. Bennett and Cecilia grew old together on that ranch, their hair silvering, their hands becoming gnarled with work and age, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it burned brighter, refined by time and trials into something unshakable. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, the house once again filling with the sounds of children when family came to visit. On a warm summer evening in 1915, 33 years after Cecilia had stepped off that train in Independence expecting to meet a man who never existed, she sat on the porch with Bennett watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved. They were in their 70s now, retired from active ranching and leaving the daily operations to William and John, but they still lived in the main house, still woke up together every morning and went to bed together every night. "You ever think about him?" Bennett asked suddenly. Thomas Whitmore, or whoever he really was, Cecilia considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder if he was even a real person or just a cruel hoax someone played. But mostly I think about how grateful I am that he never showed up." Grateful. Bennett raised an eyebrow. "If he had been there at that station, I would have married him," Cecilia said. "I would have built a life with him, whatever kind of man he turned out to be, because that was what I had committed to do. And I never would have met you. I never would have had this life, these children, this love. So yes, I am grateful to him for his absence. It gave me the chance to find what I was really looking for, even though I did not know it at the time." Bennett reached over and took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers as naturally as they had 1,000 times before. "His loss was my gain," he said softly, and she smiled at the familiar words. "Our gain," she corrected, just as he always had. "Always ours, Bennett." From that first moment to this one, and every moment in between, they sat together in comfortable silence as the sky blazed with color, the mountains standing eternal watch over the valley they had made their home. The ranch would continue after them, passed down through generations of children who carried their legacy forward. But this moment, this simple pleasure of sitting together and watching the day end, this was what really mattered. Not the land or the cattle or the buildings they had built, but the life they had created together, the love that had started with a chance meeting and grown into something that would endure far beyond their own lifetimes. Bennett Zimmer died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, Cecilia beside him as she had been for 35 years. She held his hand as he slipped away, her heart breaking and whole at the same time, grateful beyond measure for every moment they had shared. She lived another 5 years after him, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her. But she never stopped missing the man who had stopped his horse on a dusty road and offered her a second chance at life. When Cecilia Parker Zimmer died in 1920 at the age of 84, they buried her next to Bennett on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a simple stone that read, "Together forever, as we always were meant to be." The ranch continued to operate, passed down through William and then his children, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to take a chance on love. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the sun set over the Sierra Nevada mountains in a blaze of gold and crimson, the ranch hands would swear they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the main house, hands intertwined, watching the day end together just as they had done for so many years. Whether it was truth or just a romantic story that grew with the telling, no one could say for certain. But everyone agreed that if any love deserved to transcend death, it was the love between the rancher and the woman who had come to independence to marry one man and found her true home with another. The story of how they met became family legend, passed down through generations. How Cecilia had traveled across the country for a groom who never appeared, how Bennett had found her heartbroken and alone, how he had said those words that would define their life together. "His loss is my gain." It became a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best things we could never have planned or predicted. Years later, when great-grandchildren asked about the portrait that hung in the main house, the one showing a stern-faced man with warm eyes and a woman whose smile held secrets, someone would always tell the story. How love could strike like lightning on a dusty road at sunset. How the right person showing up at the wrong time could actually be the most perfect timing of all. How a mail-order groom who never appeared gave a lonely rancher the chance to find the woman who would change his life forever. And every time the story was told, whoever was listening would understand a little better that the paths we do not take are sometimes even more important than the ones we do. That closed doors can open windows we never knew existed, and that the greatest loves of our lives might be waiting for us in the most unexpected places, at the most unexpected times, if we are only brave enough to take the chance when it appears. The ranch stood for generations, a monument to hard work and good land and careful stewardship. But more than that, it stood as proof that love could transform everything, could take a woman who had nothing but a carpetbag and a broken heart and turn her into the matriarch of a family that would span generations. It proved that a man who had resigned himself to loneliness could find partnership and passion and purpose. It proved that sometimes the universe conspires to bring the right people together, even if the path to that meeting is painful and confusing and seems at the time like the worst thing that could have happened. In the end, Thomas Whitmore, whoever or whatever he had been, gave Cecilia and Bennett the greatest gift imaginable, though he never knew it and never intended it. He gave them each other. And from that unexpected gift grew a love story that would be remembered and retold for over a century. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything seems to be falling apart, when we are most lost and most afraid, because those are the moments when we are finally open enough to see the opportunities we might otherwise have missed. The legacy of Bennett and Cecilia Zimmer lived on not just in the land they had worked and the children they had raised, but in the example they set for what love could be when it was built on respect and partnership and genuine affection. They had started as strangers, become friends, fallen in love, and built a life that mattered. They had faced hardships and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and buried dreams and started over time and time again. And through it all, they had held onto each other with a fierce determination that said this partnership, this love, was worth fighting for every single day. When the last of their direct descendants finally sold the ranch in the 1980s, over a century after Bennett had first driven Cecilia out to see it, the new owners found a box of letters in the attic of the main house. They were the letters Cecilia had received from the man calling himself Thomas Whitmore, carefully preserved all those years. And tucked among them was a note in handwriting that had clearly been added much later, written in an elderly hand that shook slightly but remained legible. "I kept these as a reminder," the note read, "of how grateful I should be for answered prayers I did not know I was praying. I came to Independence to marry a man who existed only on paper. Instead, I found Bennett, who was more real and solid and true than anyone I could have imagined. These letters brought me here, to the greatest love and the fullest life I could have hoped for. May whoever reads this remember that sometimes what we think we want is nothing compared to what we actually need, and that the universe has a strange way of knowing the difference even when we do not." It was signed simply, Cecilia Zimmer, 1915. The new owners framed the note and hung it in the ranch house, a piece of history and a reminder of the love story that had unfolded within those walls. Visitors to the ranch, which eventually became a bed and breakfast, would read the note and ask about the people behind it, and the story would be told again, keeping alive the memory of the woman who came west for a wedding that never happened, and found instead a love that lasted beyond lifetimes. And so the story ends as all the best stories do, not with drama or tragedy, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a love well earned. Bennett and Cecilia Zimmer had their happily ever after, not because everything was perfect, but because they chose each other every single day, through good times and bad, through plenty and scarcity, through youth and age. They proved that true love is not found in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in the daily choice to show up, to work hard, to be kind, and to hold on even when things get difficult. Their story was not unique in its challenges or even in its joys. Countless others have fallen in love, married, raised children, built lives. But their story was unique in how it began, in that moment of serendipity when a heartbroken woman and a lonely man crossed paths at exactly the right time, when 4 words, "his loss is my gain," changed everything. It was unique in the way they chose to honor that beginning by building something lasting and true, by never taking for granted the gift they had been given in each other. And in the end, that is what makes their story worth telling and retelling, worth preserving and remembering. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Not because they never struggled, but because they struggled together and came out stronger. Not because they were special or chosen or destined, but because they made a choice, that first night on the edge of town and every day thereafter, to take a chance on love even when it was scary and uncertain, and not at all what they had planned. His loss truly was Bennett's gain. And in gaining Cecilia, Bennett gave her everything she had ever hoped for and more than she had known to ask for. Together, they built a legacy that would outlive them both, a testament to what becomes possible when 2 people meet at exactly the right moment and have the courage to see it for the gift it truly is.